Okay, so welcome everyone to the this hackathon for the MSc AI. You see on the slide there, I've called it the BCU RAISE Hackathon. So RAISE is the project at BCU that encompasses our MSc AI. So it's about raising AI skills and employability. And that's part of our core mission with this course, but it's also some wider activities. So this, although it's for the AI course, it's actually funded by the Office for Students, the UK body that oversees us as a university, making sure that we deliver the best quality teaching and employability experience for our students. Okay? So they've been very fortunate, we've been very fortunate getting funding from them to try and run things like this. So we're about trying to raise that bar and make sure everyone's more comfortable, ideally, by the time September comes around, if you are coming to us. Even if you're not coming to us, then it's still great to have you here, and maybe you'll keep BCU in mind for future. Okay. So this is our hackathon. In case you can't see the video of me, or I think it's working, it'll drop in and out as technology does. But just I wanted to give a warm welcome to everyone. It's great to see people coming from all different countries that you've listed in the chat, and it'll be really exciting to see all of you in person, hopefully in September. Okay, I'm gonna sort of set the scene for this week and for the course a bit this morning, and then there's going to be plenty of time for questions and other activities later on. Okay, I'll just admit these people. So I'm going to paste in the chat just a few links that we're going to need for later. So if you can just open those up and in your browser. So there's the first one. Here's the second one. And there's going to be a third one. Okay. I'm going to explain all about all those later, and I'll give them out again later at the relevant point. But it's just good if you wanted to start downloading those files or getting access to those. Okay, so make sure you download them, get them on your computer, and if you want to join in with the activities that we're doing later and start doing them yourselves, then that's the ideal way to do that. Okay. So, by way of introduction, for those of you who don't know me yet, some of you I met at interviews, some of you may have seen some of the webinars that we've done. And if you haven't, just search BCU MSc AI, and then you can find the webinars on the university website. If you're struggling with those, then I'll go and find the links for those and send those out. I'm a senior lecturer at Birmingham City University in artificial intelligence and data science. Okay? So my job is sort of split into a few different areas. So I teach on the computer science and the MSc AI course. I'm also the course leader for the MSc AI. So I set up and run these events, make sure that you're all coming on board properly, make sure that you're progressing through the modules properly, and try and check in whether you are doing well or if you're struggling. I'm there as the main support mechanism from an academic point of view. I'm also a researcher at BCU, so I regularly engage in AI research projects and activities there, and try to push forward AI into the real world, into some exciting and challenging areas. I'll be talking about some of those later on, okay, and give you some examples of some of the actual systems that we've outputted, and talk about our projects. I supervise a few PhD students at the moment in applied AI in a range of different areas, actually, and it's really quite exciting having people doing entirely different things. Okay. Other than that, I've been on a few committees and panels and things, making sure that things at the university and our Department of Computing and Data Science tick along. I did an undergraduate degree at Aston University, which is just across the road actually from Birmingham City University. So when I went to university, I went to Birmingham, loved Birmingham, and haven't left, actually. It's an absolutely great city, and I'm hoping that you'll find the same and agree with me on that fact when you come in September, if you've come in from outside. So I did a maths and business degree at university, undergraduate level, and did a year in industry on that, in accountancy. I'd set myself up my entire career to go into accountancy, tried a year in accountancy, realised I didn't like accountancy. No offence to accountants, but I just found it quite boring. And I want to do something a bit more innovative and exciting rather than a whole set of rule-based things. So I then had a panic in my final year of my degree and thought, what on earth do I do? I want to just do maths every day. And everyone around me said, you can't just get paid to do maths every day. So then I found a PhD position where I was allowed to do maths every day and paid for it, and it was fantastic. So I worked in the defense industry, so using AI and sonar. There's some classified elements about it and some non-classified elements about it, but in essence trying to detect really quiet targets underwater and to see what you could do about those or what those were. I'll talk about some examples of that on the course as we go on. I then finished that project and thought, defense is interesting, but I'd rather see if I can come up with a way to use AI to help people. And fortunately, there was a great project just starting at my university at Aston at the time in healthcare, and I'm going to be showing you an example of that later on. I then left research for a short bit and took on a position at a distance learning university. So I was a teaching fellow at Arden University, who you may have seen adverts for internationally or nationally. And I rose up through not just teaching, but academic management there. So I've got experience of all sorts of different aspects of the university life there. I then thought, fed up with management, I want to come back to teaching and research. That's where the exciting stuff is, getting to spend time with real people. So I came back to BCU, and I'm thoroughly enjoying my time here. It's a really innovative, exciting place, and I'm taking on this course leadership role. So hopefully you feel like you know a bit more about me. I have a golden rule of always asking questions whenever you've got questions. So stick them in the chat, stick your hand up, and then let's go through those. Okay. There's going to be plenty of room for questions of different sorts. Okay. But just sort of frame what we're going to be doing this week. So there are sort of 3 elements to this hackathon. Okay. So we're going to be talking about the background to the MSc AI. I know some of you will have seen the videos online. If you've been through an interview, I've already talked about more structure and things, so you'll be familiar with that. But also, I think it's worth me just re-going through some of that in case any new questions emerge for you. I'm also going to be talking about aspects of exploratory data analysis. Okay, this is some of the basic but really important bits that data scientists do. When we get given some new data and you just have to go and find out about it, explore it. That's going to be the main focus of this hackathon, getting you up to the point where you can do, as a group, based on some of the materials and things that we cover, a bit of exploring with some data. Find out something interesting from it. Find something that confirms what you know or challenges what you know. And that's the exciting thing about data science. It's all in the data, and we need to find out what's going on there and then check it with experts in the field to say, we found this in your data. Is this right? Is it wrong? What does it tell you? Does it challenge those conceptions that you've had for years and years? And doing exploratory data analysis over years, I found some really weird and wonderful things in the data that weren't expected by the experts in the field. We're going to be spending a lot of time with the IBM Open Data Science for All course. Okay, so there's these daily activities that we're going to be doing, where there's some slides and some online lab work that we're going to be going through. I'm going to be leading a lot of the lab work from the front, but you'll have access to all of it, so you can run it all in your own time. You can mess with the code if you're feeling comfortable with that, but just so you get some hands-on experience. I'm not expecting this week at the end of it for you to be able to go, I'm an expert in programming, I can go away and solve problem X, Y, and Z. But I want you to be able to go, I've seen how we use code to solve these problems, and I know how to run some code. And I know maybe what this bit of code does or that bit of code does. But if you leave the week going, you know what, coding still confuses me, that's fine too. Okay, it's absolutely fine. So don't worry if you leave with more questions than you came with. That's some of the exciting bit for us. Okay, that gives us more things that we're going to be covering in September. Okay, the final thing that we're going to be doing is the hack. So I'm going to split you up into groups of about 10 people maximum, depending on how many people actually turn up to this, because we could be anywhere from 30, 40, all the way up to over 100. And that's a really exciting thing. We don't know quite how popular it's going to be, how available people are going to be for this, and we're just going to roll with that. And that's going to be the fun, exciting hack bit. So I'm going to give you some data, and you're going to spend about a day and a half in groups working through this data, doing some stuff with it, exploring it, presenting it back, and then submitting it. Okay. I can see we've got a hand up, so we've got a question from Sabinus. So do you want to jump in with that question, Sabinus? I firstly just must apologise for anyone who's got a name that I try and pronounce and do a terrible job of. I am very sorry. So just that apologies out there in advance. Yeah, you can tell me in person how I'm pronouncing it wrong, and I'd love to learn how to pronounce all your names properly. So Sabinus, do you want to jump in? Either through the chat, or if you want to unmute yourself and ask you a question, and then we'll go on from there. Okay, so I can't hear anything, Sabina, so I don't know if you've unmuted yourself, or if there's problems with your microphone. So if you want to ask your question later or through the chat, then feel free to go for that. Okay, great. So we'll move on. So those are the three core things that we're going to be doing over this week, and there's sort of the emphasis of this. Let's put some days and some structure around that and see where we're going. So day 1, Monday today. I don't know why I put day 1 to 5 rather than Monday to Friday, but we'll just roll with 1 to 5. We work with numbers in AI and data all the time, so let's stick with the numbers. So I'm not going to put timings around this because I want to leave it fluid, because some stuff is going to take longer, some stuff's going to be quicker. If I put a structured plan around it, it's all going to go to pot. So we'll just leave it as quite fluid. So here we are at the start of day 1, and we've got an introduction to BCU, to the MSc AI, and the position of AI in the world. So I've got a couple of little presentations to go through there. We're going to have plenty of breaks throughout sessions. It's not going to be 6 hours of me talking and slogging away and you working and stuff. It's not formal teaching. It's supposed to be an exciting and fun experience that you can use, but if you need to dip in and out, that's okay too. Also, if there's only certain days you can go for, that's fine too. Okay? We realise that not everyone's already started on the course and things going on, okay? So, Daddy. This is one of the fun bits about working from home as well. Just this has been an exciting time for all of us. So if you do hear people shouting or kids shouting in the background, apologise, but that's just the way it is. Okay, we're quite relaxed about this rather than this whole suit and tie professional approach at BCU, because it's more approachable and it's how the real world works. So today, day 1, we're going to be doing our introduction to BCU, the MSc AI in more detail, and I say about the position of AI in the world, and thinking about AI, but how can we use AI for good? And this is a common theme that we're going to be going through for the whole course. Yes, you can use AI for solving problem X, Y, and Z in the world and doing all sorts of stuff, but is it right to do that? And there's going to be a session at the end of the week on ethics that's going to sort of go into more detail on it. Then we're going to be doing the first open data science for all set of slides and activities. So the basics of data, Python, and information. Okay. Nearly all of you don't have any experience or any formal taught experience in computing. Data science and AI naturally use computing and have a reliance on some knowledge of parts of a computer and how things work. Things like algorithms and data structures. Those may seem like technical terms and scary, but don't worry about it, because they're really not, okay? And I teach this stuff to first-year computer scientists who don't have any background in computer science, so I'm going to be giving an overview here, but also in September we'll be talking in a bit more detail, but I'm not going to be expecting everyone to be able to break down a computer into all the constituent parts and tell me how an operating system works, because you know what, that's just a waste for most AI experts. Okay. We've got some a lab activity to do with that at the end of the day that will probably be some of your first experiences in Python and in programming, but we've got a really interactive and easy and approachable way of running that. So hopefully everyone will feel a bit more comfortable about it by the end. That'll be end of day 1. Then we're going to jump into day 2. where we're going to cover data cleaning and wrangling. Most of the data we get isn't clean, isn't nice, and isn't ready for us to just throw the latest cutting edge machine learning tools, techniques, and models at. So we can't. Okay, so we need to clean it, make sure it's ready, and we'll talk a bit about what some of that entails. Data wrangling is about, in essence, wrangling and shoving that data into the way that you need it to be ready to work with. For anyone who's ever had to put a tent back in a tent bag, I would call that wrangling. Okay, it never quite goes in back the way that you would expect it to. It needs a bit of pushing and kicking to get it into the bag, holding down to get it the zip closed. Working with data and machine learning can be a bit like that. Okay, so we'll talk a bit about that with a great example. Then in the afternoon session, we're going to be doing modeling with data types, algorithms, and thinking about how we prepare our data to do some stuff with. Then we're going to jump into day 3, where we'll talk about exploratory data analysis, and that's some of my activities and slides that I've prepared for you to work through. Then the open data science for machine learning models for clustering, regression, and classification. If you've heard those terms before, then you'll know that they're not scary. If you haven't, don't worry about them. Okay, it's all going to be intuitive. Every technical thing that we do this week is going to be applied, and we're really big on that through the whole course. Yeah, we could teach you the theory and spend a year showing you theoretically how stuff works and the maths of AI, but you know what you need to be able to do is to be able to pull in data, use models, apply them, and interpret the results, and we're really big on that. Okay, so we apply. And then I'm going to introduce the hack challenge, so give you the data, tell you what groups you're in, and set you off on what we're going to need you to do. We're not just going to leave you though with that, so I'm going to be joined by a couple of the current MSc AI students, Yasmin and Mohammed, and maybe some others, depending on how many people we have in this hack. So they're going to be dropping in and out to some group sessions that you're going to be doing, so we'll give you a Teams link for your own groups. You'll be getting on with the hack and the activities there, and then they'll be dropping in saying, there's, I can see why you're struggling with that. Here's some suggestions for how to model the data or to work with that. And you should be able to come up with, as a group, something interesting from that data. But it's really not prescriptive. I'm not going to say, solve this problem. I'm going to say, here's the data. Tell me about it. Explore it. Get to understand it. Find your own interesting stuff about it as a group as well. Okay. So you'll have a whole full day working on that. And then the submission will be due. And I'll be asking you to submit some presentation slides. Tell me just into PowerPoint. I'm not expecting to be able to come up with an all singing, all dancing presentation that tells me everything about the data set, because it's a rather large data set with some really interesting stuff going on. But as a group, I'd ask you to put together a few slides with something interesting. Okay, we'll look at all of the submissions, and naturally there will be a team who's going to emerge who's done some great stuff, but hopefully everyone will have learned something from this. Okay. Now there will be a prize for the team who's produced above and beyond what everyone else has. Don't worry if that's not you, because it doesn't say that you've performed poorly or anything about this. This is, for some of you, going to be the first experience of your programming. But for the team that does perform the best and manages to go above and beyond, there is a prize of a industrial experience that we were going to be giving. So you'll get some industrial experience as a group along the course, and then we'll be talking in more detail about what that will entail. But I've got a company lined up that's going to be wanting to work with some people along the way and give you that great data science experience. Yes, so Abdul, we've got a question about the problem statement. I will be giving you some data, and it will be prescriptive in terms of this is the data you've got to work with, and I want you to tell me something interesting about it. Okay, I'll introduce what the data set and the topic will be later on. Whilst those are being judged and ranked, we're going to be looking at ethics. Okay, so I'm going to be doing a presentation about AI ethics. It's very low-level ethics, and you should be, quite approachable, and give you a dip your toe in the water with what we'll be doing later on at the end of the course on ethics, and then we'll announce the winners of the hack. After that, it should be, I hope everyone should have more of an idea about the course and AI and data science as a whole going into September. But I'll send you some links to some other great materials online and extra courses that people can do. Okay. Throughout all of these sessions, I'm going to be dedicating some time for you to ask me anything, BCU or AI related. Okay. I'll try and answer questions as we go along, but naturally some of you are going to have some bigger questions or things that may need more of an answer, or maybe questions about something from a previous day that it doesn't seem right asking as and when in the chat. So I think the best way that we deal with this is if people just email me. Okay, so I'm going to just drop my email address in, ian.rice@bcu.ac.uk. So that's in the chat there. If you want to note that down, but you've also received a couple of emails from me. So email me and start your subject with the question, and then you can ask your question either in the main subject or in the body of the question. But if you start it with that, I'll know that it's an important question from you guys from the hack, rather than just someone generally emailing me, and naturally this is going to take up the whole week. So answering emails that aren't about this are going to be quite slow. Okay, so as long as you have that in the subject line, I'll know it's important to try and answer that. So I'll collate those, and during lunchtime each day when we take our short break for lunch, I'll look at all the emails that have come in with questions and make sure that we have a good half hour at the end of the session each day to go through some of the questions and have that discussion. Okay. So after just saying about questions, is everyone comfortable? Does any questions before we move on to talking about the MSc AI course in more detail and what that's going to entail, how that's going to work for you all? Giving some more background. If anyone's got any of those, please feel free to drop them in the chat or to raise your hand. But otherwise, I think we're about ready to move on with this. So I'll just give it 30 seconds in case anyone wants to type a question in quickly or to raise their hand. So is our great question. I will reiterate this later on as well and give more detail, but we are absolutely planning to do lectures on site. I've been told we need to make sure that that's the plan and that we're ready for that. So that's been my message to the timetabling team and to the planning teams and operations to make sure that all of you guys can be on, because of the structure of this course. I think it really necessitates being on campus if we can be. We are fully accepting though that there is COVID, there are travel problems for people at the moment, there is isolation issues that people will have as well, and you know, every lecture and session that we do, we will be streaming it online as well, so that people who can't attend for illness or for whatever reason, but they want to join online, that will be available to people. Naturally, it is really, really hard as an academic, the way that we've been taught to teach, and only very few academics and teaching experts are good at teaching in person, in the room, and towards people who are online. So it's never quite as good for the people who are joining online. I've just got to completely be clear about that, but we will be making sure that people who are online can join in and still have access to all the labs, the activities, and the teaching team. Okay. I'll reiterate that later on, in particular about the COVID and how that's going to work. So the next question was from Abdul. Sir, what if I didn't make it through, or if we didn't make it through? So everyone that's here, 100%, if you haven't had your offer yet, is in the pipeline to receive an offer. Okay. Now, some of you are still waiting at the early stages and having your personal statements or your CVs and things looked at, and there is a chance that you might not get through. Okay, but that's not a hard no from the admissions team and the admissions process. Often the people who don't get through to an offer is because of their personal statement or their CV, and it's not a hard no as in, well, you'll never be able to come to BCU for this course. It's possibly a, look, we've seen your CV, we've seen your experience, and we've seen your grades, and that we think you're going to struggle with this because there is a steep learning curve, and what we're expecting is motivation from people coming on. We're not expecting experts in computing to come through necessarily, but we're expecting people to be clearly motivated and capable of technical work. So if that's not reflected in the CV, the personal statement, and your application documentation, then what we're going to be saying is, look, you're not going to be ready to come onto this, we don't think, and we don't want to take you on knowing that you're going to struggle. So it's a not yet from us. If you don't get an offer from us, it's not a no, never, it's a not yet. And I'd urge people who don't get through to try and reapply in future years. If you want to talk to me, if you do get a rejection and you want to email me and say, look, Ian, I didn't get through this year, what can I do to make sure that I'm ready for next year? And I'll drop it, we can have a quick conversation, or I can exchange a couple of emails and say, look, I'd suggest going away and doing this and this, and then you should be ready for applying next year. Okay. Basanta, so how can we get the OFS RAISE scholarship for the MSc AI for September? Okay, this is something that hasn't been well publicised, and part of that is down to me, part of that's down to marketing, and part of that's down to the OFS as well, because there is some information online, there is not a huge amount of information online about this. Okay, now every university has different rules and requirements for this. Now, Birmingham City University has a mission as a whole university for raising AI skills and employability as part of this project, but also for forwarding our equality and diversity and inclusivity agenda. So making sure that we give opportunities to underrepresented and disadvantaged groups. And that's throughout the whole of BCU. We have a particular mission for the West Midlands and for Birmingham. Okay, and as such, the OFS scholarships that we have are limited to applicants from the UK at the moment. Okay, I realise that's quite disappointing from some of the people who are international students who fit the female, black or disabled category, and I wish that I could give away scholarships to everyone, but unfortunately we're limited from the mission of the university as to who can receive those scholarships and based on the number of those. So if you're not from the UK or a UK national, then you're not going to be eligible in the first instance for one of those scholarships. Okay, now if that presents a problem for you studying this year and that you need to defer your application, then I'd suggest you get in touch with the admissions team and say that I won't be able to afford the course fees and I was banking on the OFS scholarship. I need to put back, give me a chance to save up some money from employment or find a different way of studying it. Please defer my application. So I'd suggest you get in touch with them about that. Okay, I don't have the ability to do that from the admissions point of view. So although it's nice for you to let me know, I can't enact that for you. So you need to do that through the admissions team. Okay. If you are from a UK national and are interested in it and fit the category demographic as female, black or disabled and want to register your interest for the scholarship, then please let me know. Okay, best way to do that is to send me an email. So it doesn't seem like we've got any more questions at the moment, so we'll move on to talking about the MSc AI. Okay. Now this is a really exciting course and really exciting project, and I actually got involved in this on my first day of joining BCU, and we were scoping out what this degree should look like, how we can make sure it's an exciting and innovative course, and naturally you'd expect me to say this as an academic from BCU, but I really do believe that this is the best way of teaching AI, and that this is the best course that you can do of its kind, of AI and the conversion course in the UK, if not the world. Okay, so naturally I'm the course leader, so you'd expect to say that. I'll come back to your question, Abdul, later on, but in essence, no, there is no pressure about this hack or the challenge. Okay, this is fully just an experience thing for you. So the course started off from a call from the Office for Students about wanting to make sure we met female, black, disabled learners in AI, and making sure that these people were ready to correct the imbalance that we have in AI. It sounds ironic me saying this, but there are far many people like me in artificial intelligence working in the industry, and that's causing a huge amount of problems for people from all demographics internationally. Okay, and the best way, in my opinion, of trying to correct that imbalance, rather than trying to deal with it from the companies who won't actually do much about it and there's no incentive for them necessarily in the first instance, is to make sure that we upskill as many people from this core demographic that aren't represented, to make sure that you can then go and correct some of those problems. Okay, so There are far too many people like me. We need to make sure that it's corrected and that we give all of you the skills that you need to go and correct that. So the Office for Students said, look, we're going to give some scholarships, but also funding for mini hackathons and courses like this, and to make sure that we raise the profile of this problem. So in the response to that, at BCU, we created this artificial intelligence course, and we tried to make sure it was as approachable and representative as possible for people with all sorts of different issues, really, from that demographic. So we went out to potential students. We were told, look, we need to make sure that the course is approachable for us. We need to make sure that we can get into the university on the days that need to be done. We need to make sure that there's an online aspect to that. You know, if I've got caring or family and I need to upskill maybe later on in the career, and you've got childcare responsibilities or caring for your parents or elderly relatives, how on earth do you balance that with full-time study? Okay? How do you fund that? So we tried to make sure that we had an approachable way of teaching. How do you balance off doing multiple assessments at once? Well, it's really difficult. It's really hard. So we tried to come up with two different aspects that we balance together to make sure that the course is as easy as possible to try and upskill in terms of the complex elements of AI. So we recommend, before people even start, there's a Python course for you to do called the Python for Data Science course, again from IBM, who's one of our project partners, and they've done some great work with us to try and shape the course. So I'll send out the link at the end of the week for that, or if I forget, then please remind me, or if you want to earn in that, let me know. There's just a free online course that you can do as many times as you want, and you get a little certificate from them at the end. It's a bit like this course, but slightly more basic in terms of just those first few lines of coding in Python, getting you comfortable with what that is, what it looks like, how to do a couple of simple things, and making sure that when you come in September, it's not the first time that you're doing stuff. Then we'll move into our first module, Computing for AI. This is a bit of a levelness module, but it's also making sure that everyone leaves that module with the basic requirements that we have for you in terms of computing. Okay, naturally for AI, it relies on some coding elements so that you can create code to solve a couple of common problems in AI, but also be able to handle data and to be able to manage that, to be able to use databases. That's often a requirement. So I've had a good question from Shemaya about can the IBM Python for Data Science course be done in spare time? Absolutely. It is. It says up to 4 hours. I think it's about 2 hours, give or take, really. But you can do it whenever you want, as you want. And it could be evening, weekend, whatever suits, really, or even through your lunch times. Some of these courses work well to do regularly and in small chunks. And you know, if you're searching for YouTube videos about introduction to machine learning or to Python or to programming, you know, there are some brilliant courses online. If you're not sure if the course that you're looking at is representative or useful, ping me an email, I can have a quick look at it. But there are a couple of great ones online on YouTube, and you'll find loads of them. We'll be recommending some as we go through the course, and saying I completely endorse this, you know, set of videos. And some of them are 20 videos, some are a few, some are 100, and they're broken down into chunks. It's always best if you can keep up with them and do it regularly in smaller chunks, rather than just going, right, I'm going to spend a whole weekend learning how to code, be an expert, and then get away and expect to be able to do that forever. Then we have a common rule in teaching: learn quick, forget quick. If you take it slower, steadier, more regularly, and keep up with activities, then chances are that you're going to be more able to build from those skills and use that as a good foundation. Computing for AI, in terms of the assessment, and I left in the poll for people being able to say about whether or not you were concerned about the assessment, but actually it seemed that people weren't, and that there was a general comfort with the idea that we're going to be assessing you properly, which is always nice to see. There's no exams for anyone, just to make sure that you're all aware of that. In terms of the coding, 10% of people said that you were concerned about that, but no one said you were concerned about the assessments, which is lovely to see. So I was just on my phone double checking in with the poll there. So in terms of the assessment for that first module, there's going to be some blogs that you have to write. We're going to say, go away and do this activity at the end of the lab. That's assessed to a small extent, and then write a little blog about how you solved that problem. blogging in AI and data science is really common, and it's really good if you can build up your own blog as well. And we'll get someone on later, Yasmin, who's created her own blog to talk about why she's done that. We've got some great initiatives planned over the next year for you to get involved in. There will be a mini blog, almost like an unofficial course handbook that I'll be asking you as students to contribute to, so that you can come up with your own way of saying, this is my version of what was really important from those lectures from the labs, how to do this, solve this problem, do that technique in AI. And it'll be a really great resource by the time you finish that for you all to look back on and for future generations of the course. So that's the computing for AI module. Then we go on to data visualization. There'll still be some computing and coding in that. We'll also be using a great online resource called Click, and there are lots of big companies use internationally to build dashboards, and you can get digitally badged in that at the end if you want to. So Click will be one part of that, but we're going to be breaking down data visualization to its nuts and bolts early on. Okay, I'm talking about going right down simple to what is a bar chart. And you might be thinking, what on earth, like, why are we wasting our time with what a bar chart is? I know what a bar chart is. And then I'm going to tell them and say, well, do you? Really, they do you? Okay, so we're going to go right down to basics and go, here's a bar chart. What color should the bars be? Why are you choosing those colors? Those two tones, do they work well together? Do they do a stark contrast or a soft contrast? Does that meet the editorial design principles that you're trying to embolden in that graph? Does it suit the audience that you're trying to present it to? Are you trying to put fear in there? Or are you trying to put control in there? Or are you trying to show there's nothing much to fear at all? So a graph with COVID data in, are you trying to make it a stark contrast for the public, or a soft contrast to say there's not much to fear, case numbers are falling day by day? So soft color palettes versus harsh color palettes. The scale, do you want it to be a linear or a log axis? And we'll be talking about what those two actually mean later on, but to give big contrast or small contrast on numbers. The whole design of these graphs is really important. The government in the UK have been presenting statistics and figures regularly, but so have the WHO, the World Health Organization, and governments internationally. Everyone has their own agenda that they've been trying to give. I will be showing some of that data to you and saying, what is the agenda that they're trying to give based upon their editorial design in this? Okay, so really thinking about data visualization from a psychological and from a human-computer interface aspect. Okay, so that's all we'll be breaking down the theory and going right back to bar charts and pie charts to start with. We'll also be looking at some great and neat ways of doing interactive data visualization with those. I've got an example slightly later on that we're going to be going into of where I've done some innovative data visualization aspects for us. Then we're getting on to machine learning. Okay, and this is the first like in-depth bit of what lots of people consider to be AI they'll be doing, and that will be starting in November into December. Each module is 4 weeks, right, and you do the assessment within that. I should mention the data visualization module, the assessment for that is a bit different to lots of other modules. So as a group, you'll be creating a dashboard for a data set that I suggest, although you could go away and choose your own data set as a small group of 4 or 5 people, depending on numbers, and you'll be recording a video of you describing that data visualization and that dashboard that you've created. So whether you've created one to show a particular story that's valuable for a company, or one that's public facing, if it's, for instance, COVID or a public information aspect. So we had some really interesting ones where people were analysing electoral data in this year. So they broke down votes for the 2 main political parties over the last general election and how they worked in different regions with drop-down menus and different data selections, and where you could get really down in the in-depth analysis of what was happening in certain demographic regions and why people voted for those. So it's not just a dashboard you're creating, but you're telling the story of that data. That's part of the assessment, and then the other part is you critiquing a data visualization, either from another group or, depending on how this works, just a standard data visualization that's been given. So COVID has presented us with some great opportunities for data storytelling that prominent people in government and internationally have done. So we can look at some of their data presentations and go, well, what was the editorial thinking here? Did it meet the audience? Did they choose the color and tone and visual aesthetic properly, or could it have been done better, bringing in theory of visual analytics? The machine learning module will give you some of those hands-on tools and techniques to load in data and then start using clustering, regression, get down to the exploratory data analysis parts and to find out what's going on in a data set. Okay, we'll give you a data set as an example, but you can choose your own as well and go and explore that and analyze that. And the assessment for that will be a report that you write yourself and try and analyze a complex data set to tell us what's going on in that. It will be a really good, like, dip your toe in the water with what you might do in your dissertation elements later on in the module. Okay. Then you've got a break over Christmas. We can give you some stuff to do if you want to work over that break and get some early reading done or to watch some videos and stuff. But on that, it's always good if people just take a week or two off, if not more, just to make sure that you're ready and rested going into January, because that's when we hit some of the more complex parts and some of the hard aspects of AI and of the course. So we've got two modules that are tied together called Applied AI and Deep Learning. So Applied AI is where we look at using AI to solve some of those complex areas that it is often applied to. So looking at natural language. So looking at text, for instance, and saying, how on earth do we use AI to model language to text to solve this problem or understand what's going on? Is there a positive or a negative sentiment or opinion in the text and emotion in that? So you can look at Twitter data and things. What about these images and these pictures? Are there pictures of cats and dogs, for instance, or aeroplanes or drones? What's going on there? So we'll be looking at some of that and breaking that down in the Applied AI module. Also about temporal data. How can you predict the future using AI? Okay, so that will be seeing how AI applies in and of itself and using machine learning tools and techniques in that area. Then we'll be doing deep learning. So that's the cutting edge AI stuff that you see probably in the news, and that people are, Google, Facebook, and all of these big companies, Microsoft, are all pushing and trying to use all the time. So we'll use deep learning, cutting edge tools and techniques, load in preset libraries for those rather than getting you to create an image recognition algorithm from start, because no one really does that anymore. You'll be loading in Google's cutting edge one, or the one from Oxford University called VGG. That's a standard, really good cutting edge image recognition algorithm. And you say, well, that's already quite good at understanding lots and lots of images from different areas and categories. I'm going to use that as a starting point and then say, to that algorithm, you're an expert at doing this. I want you to look specifically at these areas though. So tailor it just to look at these expert areas. Then after that, you'll be assessed in terms of those two modules, and we'll be giving weekly challenges to you as a whole cohort to say, look, here is a challenge for predicting the future, for analyzing text, for looking at images, for what we call reinforcement learning, getting a computer to do a game-based aspect as well. Okay, so you'll be doing that and competing in and amongst yourselves and with us as a teaching team. Okay, if you outperform the teacher and do better prediction of future values than the teacher, then you get 100% on that aspect, on that little competition. If you do quite well, but better than baseline, better than a random prediction, say, or a rubbish prediction model, then great, you'll perform well, but you'll be ranked along the cohort and you'll get a grade according to that. So you're competing with one another on that. And there's a really innovative assessment idea, but it works really well for getting you to push yourselves harder and harder to do as well as you can on the assessment level. The final module is called Impact of AI. And this is where we look back at the whole course and go, yeah, great. You can use deep learning, you can use AI, you can use these cool cutting edge tools and techniques. The thing is, should you? And how should you? So we'll talk about AI pipelines. So how to implement an AI tool or system in the real world to solve a real problem. And I'll talk about the ethics of that. Is it right to use AI in this way? What are the ethical conundrums that we have to face and think about, and how should we limit our algorithms or our data sources to make sure that we're doing things right? Then it will move on to horizon scanning as well. So looking into the future, what are the cool cutting edge AI tools and techniques that are coming into this field? How can we use AI in smart agriculture and farming? So that will be the impact of AI module. And in that, there are two assessments. One is a horizon scan. So looking at the cool AI tools and techniques that are going to be used in the future in an area that you choose, say smart agri-tech, self-driving cars, smart pharmacy. And then another one will be an ethical debate that you will have. So we split you into groups, we set a topic, and then you have an ethical debate motivated by sources in the literature and current topical things that are happening in AI, and saying these are the main issues, and arguing for or against an AI application in an area. You don't get to choose whether you're for or against it. We tell you, because this is part of the important aspect of AI and of being an AI expert that you will be at the end of this course. You won't necessarily get to choose whether or not you're on the for or the against side, because you'll be working in an organization that is doing something, and you need to probably defend your organization either for or against. Okay. So that will be a cool way of working, and it's a really innovative assessment actually, and really excited for those who took part this year. And later on, when we're working with Yasmin and Mohammed, you can ask them some questions about those assessments, if they've got any advice for you, but also how it went and if it was exciting or not. And hopefully they'll agree with me. Then you move on to your project, and there are a couple of different ways of doing the project. I talk about this online anyway, so in the course videos you can go away and find out about that. But the students just now have started their projects, and Yasmin and Mohammed are each doing two very different projects, so it's worth asking them later on if you've got any questions about what you can do your individual project on. But in essence, it's pretty much anything. If you've got an AI problem that you want to solve and you can find some data for that, we'll supervise and support you in that. But we also have some companies that have problems. So Yasmin at the minute is working with an external company on a chatbot solution that's really pushing the limits of what's doable with AI and what can be implemented in a really great application. I don't want to spoil that, so I'll let her talk about that if you want to. Then if you're on the placement version of the course, you'll undertake your placement starting in September. Okay. So that's the course in detail, really. Then here's what our current teaching timetable looks like. Now, I haven't been given exactly what the dates will be, the days on campus, the Tuesday, Wednesday. This is also going to depend on timetabling, structure, also on how many people are coming on the course. The course is proving very, very popular, and it will likely be that we have to split you up into a couple of different streams rather than having too many people on campus at once in a lecture theatre, because it looks like at the minute the course is so popular and going to receive such attention and support from the teaching team that we can't teach you all in one single lecture theatre. There's just too many of you to go all in one go. But for our current group, we teach on campus 2 days a week when we were on campus. So it's Tuesday and Wednesday between 9 and 3. The idea is that anyone who had to do a school drop-off or pick-up could go away and do that before and afterwards based on the school club and things. Or if you've got elderly relatives to look after or work commitments or things, you could manage those. Those were our on-campus intensive teaching days. And remember, we teach over 4 weeks for a module. So if you missed one of those, it was quite a significant bit, but naturally everything was recorded, so you could go back. It's just important that you keep up with what's going on in the course, or let us know if you're struggling. Then there's some self-study around that, and some exercises that we give you. Say, go away, watch this, do this, try and solve this problem. We tell you what the assignment was very early on in the module, so you could start at least thinking about it and working towards that as you go. But regularly there'd be assignment support sessions, live sessions, if need be some assignment preparation that you could do as a cohort and sort out some groups yourselves. Some of the students on the course at the moment have formed some great friendships, I think, and some great support networks actually, and get in touch with each other when they're struggling. Go to each other and say, I've no idea how to do this part of the assessment, and someone will go, I've got some ideas about that. I started off this way, that way, etc. So they have their own call or WhatsApp messages and things. So I'd encourage you to get in touch with each other and start doing that. So that's what the teaching table looks like currently. We'll know what the days are. We've requested Tuesday, Wednesday, but I haven't had that confirmed 100% yet. Okay. I think it's worth highlighting the possible routes about the course as well. lots of conversion courses assume you come from all over the place and we're going to upskill you in this area and then you're going to do this for the rest of your life. That's how law conversion courses work, or psychology conversion courses, for instance. That's kind of where we were coming from to start with, but that's not the only options. Okay. So your possible exit routes would be to become a data scientist or an AI expert, entry level. So go and get a graduate job in that and compete very well against other graduates. You would easily outperform those graduates who've done a BSc and some of those graduates who've done an MSc in other areas. Okay. So that would be one option. If you wanted to go and be a data scientist, absolutely, we'd 100% support you, and the course is geared up towards that. But that's not your only option. Okay. Further study and research are also possible. Whether you want to go on and do another MSc in an applied area and say, look, I want to use AI in education, but I need to understand more about education. So go away and do your PGCE or your teaching qualification to get a good background in education. You could then be a teacher either in AI or computing or mathematics probably, or you could then be a teacher in history or geography or whatever interests you, what you were doing before you came to do this course, but with AI background. So you'd be able to understand the learning analytics, and there's some exciting learning analytics projects going on at the moment, even at BCU. I've currently got project students working with me on looking at student data to go back and say, you know what, we've got loads of students, some of which are performing really well, some of which are really struggling. What modules do they struggle on? What did they come in with? And how can we identify those in advance? Can we predict and use predictive analytics on our learners and say, look, you're going to struggle at these 3 or 4 modules across your whole course of study at the BSc level, at the undergraduates, and we'll look at it at the master's level too, and say, these are the pinch points. How can we make sure that we give you as much support going into those as possible, or change the assessments to make sure they're as approachable as possible? And there will be some learning analytics happening on you guys in September. So when you start the course, we'll be looking at your attendance, your engagement, and seeing in advance, do we think you're going to be struggling with the course? What support can we give? It's not us trying to do anything to give you a negative impact, but more we're looking to how we can support you better. How do we group you better to give you the most diverse aspects? If you want to go on to do a PhD afterwards as well, we would absolutely condone and support that. There aren't a lot of funded PhD opportunities kicking around at the moment internationally and nationally in the UK, but if you find one, we'll 100% support you in that. If you have found funding or can get funding to do a PhD, then we'd be more than happy to find someone in our BCU team that can support you, either someone from the teaching team or from outside in the wider data science team as well. And the final aspect is return to industry. So this was sort of what I was talking about with that further study aspect of the learning analytics and the education. So if you've done a mechanical engineering, for instance, background, just as a rough example, you can go back into engineering with AI skills and be able to solve some of the mechanical engineering problems with your AI, or do some better data analytics there. Okay. So we've had a question from Shemai. Are possible routes to be able to steer towards a data analyst? 100%, yes. Data scientist or data analyst. If you can be a data scientist, chances are you could be a data analyst. You may need to upskill in some of the more data management aspects and some cloud or database things that data analysts more commonly do than data scientists, but 100% you could. Okay, and if you wanted to, let us know on the course and we could say, look, you're doing great on the course and do the modules, continue and pay attention to all the stuff we're teaching you, but why don't you have a look at X, Y, and Z? Okay. Course fees. I don't think we really need to talk about those, given you're already applying, you already know. What people are really interested in generally is what do AI experts earn? And it varies, but AI experts can earn quite a lot of money. Okay. As the field becomes more and more densely populated, those salaries are going to drop bit by bit, but they rise for you if you're an expert and if you really push yourself to be the best you can, get the most digital badging qualifications and the most experience, so work in different companies in different fields and do things like have your own blog, have your own code set up in your own GitHub pages, really push yourself to be the best you can be. You'll attract the best attention. AI was one of the fastest growing occupations going. So there's a question there about why are there no examinations for assessments? And it kind of actually links in with this next slide perfectly. So thank you, Muhammad Ali Hassan. That was a perfectly timed question. AI experts do a lot of different things depending on where they work and how they work and things. AI experts don't tend to do exams, written formal exams, or time-constrained things. Yes, everyone works at deadlines, but it's not the same as a time-constrained assessment or a 3-hour paper that you sit down and do. So why on earth AI experts aren't doing that in industry? Why on earth would I set you a 3-hour paper to sit down and do and say, tell me about the theory of this, and you've got, write 1,500 words in 3 hours on this day in a room? That's just not realistic. You don't work in your own environment best that way, and it's not representative. So it was just a waste of time of setting you an assessment. Every assessment that we give you is motivated by industry, by the AI experts and the recruitment experts and the employers that we spoke to, where we went out to them and said, look, we're thinking about doing these assessments, and some of them said, great, or some of them said, I changed that one a bit because actually we do more of this in industry. We're going, great, perfect, we'll change it to that. So that's how we worked. So every assessment you do is tailored towards industry. So AI experts are regularly, working on different aspects of AI, getting given different data projects, images or text or reinforcement learning problems or time series problems to predict the future. They're all doing all this different stuff regularly, so you need to be able to chop and change between them. They're using different types of AI aspects. You absolutely will be building a portfolio out of this throughout the course. So that's what I'd love for you to be able to do. These challenges that we give you will give you the opportunity to work on a portfolio, but create a blog as well. Build up that blog or that portfolio, create your own WordPress site, however you want to do it. A Wix site, great. Get your visibility out there and your portfolio built up, so that when you go to a job interview and they say, what can you do with AI, you could just whack it out on the desk. Or my sneaky thing that I often do at interview stages is email it the day before the interview and just say, oh, by the way, this may help for the interview, just to give some background information about me. Here's my portfolio of AI projects that I've worked on, where I've worked on looking at predictive healthcare, learning analytics, defense industry. And before you even walk through the interview door or enter the interview meeting room on Teams or on Zoom, they've seen your work. So if you've got that portfolio polished, ready, finished, finessed, and your blog, if you've got one ready, or any YouTube video sites that you've done, or if you contribute to this unofficial guide that I was talking about to the MSc AI at BCU, you can link to those, cite yourself, reference yourself, and get your name out there. Okay? We're all about maximizing employability for you, because naturally you're going to be going up for jobs against people who've spent years in computing. There's no reason that they will be any better at AI than you. In fact, they'll be worse at aspects of AI, some of the complex and the understanding bits, because of the backgrounds that you bring and because of the experience you're going to learn from each other. Okay, so it's making sure that that's visible, rather than you going in and almost feeling defensive and saying, oh, yeah, I'm competing against people in computing and I don't think I'm going to get this job. No, that's not going to be the case. Now, there were a couple of webinars I did. If you saw those, great. It was lovely to have you on the call. If not, don't worry. These are recorded and available through the MSc AI website that you can find. If you're interested in watching those back, then just let me know. And if you can't find the links to those from a quick Google search. So I did one about what is art. So using AI to take this image, the Great Wave of Kuranga, and merging it with other images, so a picture of a great sea turtle, to create art. And it was really answering that philosophical question, can AI create art? We created some nice pictures. Whether or not they were art is an entirely open question for people to interpret in their own way and to argue about. But then what's an image? And AI doing image analysis. Okay. In fact, what can AI do with images? Just posing this question. In one of the webinars I opened with, well, maybe you could ask these people. In fact, well, you would be able to if they were real people. These people came from a website online called This Is Not a Person. An AI machine has imagined these pictures of people and created them completely artificially, and they look like entirely realistic people, right if you zoom right in, they're very high quality images as well. So this person does not exist. Yeah, there's a Twitter feed for it, and Alice, yeah, great that you followed that. Have a feel free to search that up or to post that Twitter feed if you want to, Alice, just so that others can. At Christmas, we were treated in the UK to the alternative Queen's speech, which was a deep fake. So that's part of image analysis and image generation AI can be used for. So it created an alternative Queen's speech where the AI system made up a speech and video for the Queen and did this on Channel 4 in the UK, if you want to search that up. And it was an incredible that they managed to deep fake that. Deep fakes are something that takes we could talk about for hours and hours, and actually we will mention them on the course if you're interested in looking into them. What's really interesting though is when you're using thanks Alice, that's great to see that Twitter feed there. When you're using AI to try and beat AI, and this is where reinforcement learning, that topic comes from, where you've got AI for assessment attendance verification. So an AI system here has clearly looked at this picture of all of these students in this lecture theatre who are supposed to be doing this quiz, and it's looking at them and putting a red box around everyone's face, and it'll then look back at the register and say, right, this is person 1, person 2, person 3, person 4, they're all attending. Okay, so these people are all there, and then it's supposed to put a picture, a bounding box around this person's face, but it hasn't. Now, they've been blurred out naturally for the purpose of this image, but because of the t-shirt this person is wearing, and it's not, maybe I'm not very up to date with fashion, it's not an overly fashionable t-shirt, but this t-shirt was designed by an AI system whose specific job that it was trained to do was to beat image recognition algorithms and facial recognition algorithms. So by wearing this top, this person's face can't be recognized because it fools the AI system into thinking that he's a bird or that he's a table. It's been specifically designed for that. Okay, we'll talk more on the actual course and some of the ethics aspects about that. So Sheena, you've raised the question, does AI ethics place a limit on how far you can push AI? If you're adhering to ethical standards, then yes. If you're not adhering to ethical standards, then no, it doesn't limit you at all. There's some real questions being asked about a company based in Israel at the moment, whose AI and cybersecurity leaking software has been used internationally, and whether or not they should be culpable for even deaths that are being accused of happening based upon that software. So we'll go into really, really hard and emotional and emotive ethical questions to be asked there. And we'll talk about some of those in a short while. I'm using on the AI for Good presentation that we'll be talking about. So you all know that applications are open because you've applied. We are planning for full face-to-face delivery. If for whatever reason we go back into lockdown in the UK or we're banned from doing face-to-face lectures, please don't panic. We will be doing online lectures, and yes, you don't want to be learning from home or from wherever you're staying. You want to be on campus, and I 100% want to support that wherever possible. But if we're restricted from doing lectures or labs or any part of the teaching on face-to-face, it will be migrated online, but with more support thrown at it. Okay, so you won't be given a lesser quality service. We will improve the quality of it however we can. Some things work better for online. Some of the lab aspects, actually, as you might see this week, work really well online, where you've got the code there. You can dip in and out and spend more time looking at the bits you want to, rather than it being face-to-face and me wandering around the lab trying to support each of you individually. I can do as a whole. I mentioned about the scholarships, and we've got our MSc AI, but also my email address, which I posted in the chat earlier. So it's ian.rice@bcu.ac.uk. If you hit the participants list and the drop-down arrows, or you can click on my picture, you should be able to see me and then see my email address as well, if you're familiar with Teams. Okay. So I talked about giving an overview and an intro to the course. And I think I've done pretty much that. One thing I'm going to mention is about Google Colab. Okay, we use that extensively on the course, It's free and it's a brilliant way of using and teaching programming and coding. And we're going to be using that today and the rest of the days on the course. And I encourage you as a group to work on Colab. So you will need to set yourself up with a Google account to do that. Okay. So we'll just go on and I'll introduce how you set yourself up with Google Colab. Okay. Now I shared some links earlier. Tell you what, I'll just jump back in the slides briefly to share a link to the Colab file, but also to some files with these slides on. So this file, when you go on that link, you should be able to download a zip file, unzip it, and it's got the slides for today. And in those slides is the explanation about how to set yourself up on Google Colab. Okay, in essence, you just need to have a Google account. You don't have to have a Gmail email address. I use my ian.rice@bcu.ac.uk account. So I'll show you how to set that up for whatever email address you want to do. As I can see, you've asked a question for international students. Will there be study loans since scholarship is not certain? There won't be a scholarship, a loan available from BCU. So you will have to go and find your own loan aspects or ways of funding the course there. The scholarship isn't available to international students as a default. Okay, so look to your own sources of funding, your own government's Erasmus schemes or whatever you can find there. Okay, if you need to put the course off for you, as I say, get in touch with the applications team. So Google Colab, what that is, I'm just going to jump across here so you should be able to see this screen. Hopefully, can you see the window where I'm scrolling? If someone could just let me know in the chat where it says hello world here. Perfect, thanks Adu. So yeah, I will often ask people to jump in and say, so great, you can see this. Now this is what Colab looks like. It's got bits of text, it's got bits of code, and we can run our code online. So I don't have to worry about what your computer setup is, and you don't have to install anything. You just go to this website and you can start running your Python code. Really easy for teaching, really great for getting it to work. Okay, we're going to delve into this notebook much later on today. Okay, we've got some more stuff to go through before we get there. Okay, so Google Colab. The way to get yourself set up is, first of all, go to Google and type into the search bar Google Colab. The first link that should come up is Google Colab on colab.research.google.com. It's free online access to Google's cloud servers. You can pay to use their, what we call the GPUs, their faster processing systems, if you need to, but we don't need to for this course. We're quite happy with all the free stuff here. Okay, so you've got Colab. Click on that link and it takes you to this page. Now, if you haven't signed into a Google account in Chrome, I'd recommend using the Chrome browser if you need to download that for it. You've got plenty of time before we do the activities during the lunch break or our breaks today, but I'd really recommend doing that. Okay, so Collaboratory is zero configuration required execution of Python code. So you'll have to click sign in then. Okay, if you haven't signed into your Chrome browser, don't worry, then type in your email address if you need to sign in, or create an account. I had to create an account the first time, so it then takes you to this, create your Google account. So type in your first name and your last name. Then either your username at gmail.com or your current email address instead. So click that button if you need to. And then set up a password. Okay. So when I filled that in, it was Ian Rice. My email address was ian.rice@bcu.ac.uk, and then my password. Okay. So you can absolutely do it with whatever email address. You don't need to create a Gmail one and have lots of different emails going. Then you hit next, and it takes you to this page. So it needs a phone number. You do have to put one in for verification purposes, but I don't believe that they do anything with it. And to be honest, if your phone number's in any system online, Google probably has access to it anyway. But if you're absolutely against doing that, then feel free to just watch along with the slides, and we'll talk about privacy later on. And your date of birth doesn't have to be exact if you don't want it to be. Okay. They can explain why they ask you for that. And you hit next. It gives you the privacy terms. Scroll down and hit accept. And then you confirm. When you do that, you're logged into your Chrome browser and into Google Colab, and it shows up this page. So the standard opening website for Google or Colab notebook that it opens, a standard from google.com, when you go into Colab, appears, and you've got just a welcome to Colab file. I'm going to give you access to all of the Colab slides, notebooks that we go onto, so you can either do it from the web link or you can download them each day from the zip files I give you, and then click on upload here, choose the file from your downloads and upload it. Or create a new notebook if you want to start from scratch, which you'll possibly need to do when you do the hack. Or you might want to just take the work that I've given you and edit it. So that is Google Colab. So I'd recommend, like I say, during the lunch break, getting on and getting yourself set up there. Okay. So as I say, the slides are available on that link that I've put in the chat there, but I'll be going through those again later on as well to say, look guys, now we're going to be using Colab. Click on this link and go away and make sure that you're signed in. Okay, so the Colab page will look like this when we work with it later. Now, we've reached the end of the first set of slides that I was going to do that introduced BCU a bit and more the MSc AI, and now we're going to be moving on to talking about the position of AI in the world. Okay, I'm mindful that I've been speaking for about an hour and 20 minutes now, quite a long time, and you've done really well if you've managed to focus through all of that. I'm going to give a short 5-minute break now for me to then prepare the next set of slides to talk about the position of AI in the world. Then we'll have a lunch break, and then we'll do that first IBM Open Data Science for All, the basics of data, Python, and information. Okay. Before we move on, does anyone have any questions about the MSc AI at BCU? No, I couldn't hear you. I could see you talking, but I couldn't hear you, Shamaya. So I don't know. Mohammed Ali Hassan, in terms of this hackathon, there isn't a cash or a partial scholarship or bursary aspect to this, but the prize is for the winning group an industrial placement, so a data science project and a company that you'll get to work with doing a data science project with them for valuable real world experience. That will be really useful for the future career. So if I deal with Shemai, your question first, absolutely great point. So the industry is getting more and more populated. I think I would argue that it's not oversaturated. I think the analysis of oversaturation is very niche, and the way it's very to look at the data, employment data and recruitment data, and say that's oversaturated in this data I've looked at. That's part of what we're going to be talking about over this week, and thinking actually what are the limitations to the data and the analysis I've done. and that's a big theme on the whole course. What are the limitations of my analysis? So thinking about that, if they've looked at specific areas and said, look, people working as data scientists whose core job it is to data science, for lack of a better way of putting it, then maybe they're looking at it and saying, actually, you're there's too many people in there. The thing is, are there the right people there? So I can see someone's sharing their desktop there, so I'll just try and nick that back. Don't know why it's sharing my desktop. Okay, so quality is an issue, Prakash, but also the use of data scientists. So there's this myth or this common statement that data is all around us. And the thing is, yes, it is, but you've also got to go away and grab it. And there are so many companies that don't have an understanding of the value of their data or how to use that data, and what that data can do for them, or even that data exists. I've worked with some companies where they think that they've got a little bit of data, and you go away and analyze, and you go, well, you've got shed loads of stuff. You've got information left, right, and center that you just haven't quantified. And they need data scientists to go away and do that. They're just not recruiting data scientists. So the data science market, although, you know, if you search for jobs, it may say this: the need for data science is massive. Okay, it doesn't need to be people applying deep learning left, right, and center. It can be people just doing some statistical analysis and managing the data properly, and some of that data analytics bit, but also just general rigorous testing of data and assumptions and modeling and things. So I don't think that there's an oversaturation there. I think there's some messages, and we're working constantly with companies to try and tell them that you need to be recruiting more, not less, data scientists. Okay. So hopefully that's kind of answered the question. In terms of success rate, the course is run for 1 year, and the students are currently on their project. So I don't have any employability statistics or figures to give. I am optimistic about our chances. BCU has good recruitment figures for graduate level courses, and you know, we're really optimistic that everyone on our course will get a great job or some great opportunities going forwards. Mohammed Ahmed, you asked if the today's session will be recorded. Yes, it is currently being recorded. I will try and make sure, as long as the recording works, and Teams is about 95%, 98% successful in terms of recording. You've probably found the same over the last couple of years if you've used Teams lots. If it does work, I'll upload the video to either to an external facing service or to YouTube and share that link out to everyone who got my email this morning. Okay, you asked if we're late arriving by 1 or 2 weeks due to some reason, that we'll be able to attend the classes online. So naturally, we've got COVID, we've got lockdown, isolation periods, all that stuff. Yes, online attendance is going to be doable completely for that, but I really would encourage people to try and arrive early, make sure you're in person early for in-person teaching, because you get more in the room, and we get more in the room from you. It's so much easier to look at heads and nodding or shaking or looking perplexed or confused or angry at us the way we've explained stuff. So try and do that if possible. So Edna, you'd asked about sending the links, and Alice, thank you so much for sending those. This is what I love about our AI students at BCU, more so than any other course I found, actually. You guys are really supportive and helpful by nature, and want to look up each other and support me. So thanks. You noticed that it would have taken me time to find that. So Alice has reshared that. Everyone else, you know, feel free to take up the lead if someone asks a question that you want to contribute to or to respond to. Jump in the chat. Don't just wait for me. So yeah, we'll be talking about this shortly, Prakash, about data science and what data science actually is, and what data scientists have to do a lot of. Okay, I've got a great example of that coming up. So, as I said, I've talked for about an hour and a half. I've got some slides about taken from an AI for Good talk that I gave a year ago. That's still relevant. I'm going to be doing it again in induction week that I'll be inviting you all to attend. But it's also for undergraduate students. So it sort of frames AI. Before I jump onto that, I think we'll take a short 5-minute break and pause, grab a drink, comfort break and everything, and then jump back in. Okay, so we'll do a 5-minute comfort break, and what I'll do to make that clear to everyone is just edit the slides here. Put that up, and then everyone can see 5-minute comfort break. So we will be coming back at 11:35. Okay. So I'm going to turn off the video and my audio, but I'll remain Hi everyone. So possibly one of the lessons that you'll learn quite early on is that I'm not the best at timekeeping. But fortunately I don't need to be. So I've got a few slides to talk about an introduction to artificial intelligence from an AI for good kind of a perspective. Okay, so we'll go through those and then we'll take a break for lunch and then move on to the first technical session from the IBM Open Data Science for All course, and then do some actual Colab programming. Okay. Can I just check that people can hear me and see me and that the tech is working? Perfect. So before we move on, I recently was introduced in Teams. Everyone's just piled in. Great. I was recently introduced to this thing called Together Mode in Teams, right? I've been itching to test it out, and I think it will be a great, memento almost of this session if we can get a good Together Mode picture. So I was wondering if people feel comfortable. I'll stop sharing my screen so there's not that on the bandwidth. But if people feel comfortable for just 30 seconds, turn your video camera on so that I can see you, you can see me, and we can get a nice little screenshot of a group of people with it on. So I'll turn it to Together Mode and we'll see. There we go. Just so you know, this isn't a BCU lecture theatre. This is just one of the ones in Teams. Excellent, that's fantastic. See, one of the important things about an MSc, and not just in AI, but just in anything, but an MSc is really important for you, and part of what you're paying for is access to each other, not just to teaching material or skills or employability or stuff. You guys are going to form a network, or parts of you, through later life, through your careers. You're going to help get each other jobs. You're going to help work together on various different aspects. You can look out for each other, and hopefully some of you will become some really close friends after the year. Okay, of all the things that we put you through. So that's what you're getting, what you're paying for as well. And it's try and embrace that, get to know each other, get to socialize with each other, work with each other on problems. Or it doesn't have to be even necessarily coursework, but it can be anything really. If you're interested in using AI in a specific project or want to try it out in some different way, you don't just have to come to us as a teaching team or try it on your own. You can go on and try and do it, with each other. Okay. The way that we work often is through Microsoft Teams, and I have a team site specifically for the MSc AI, and it's got a chat, just a general chat area and file storage and all that stuff. So all the students can get in touch with each other, post messages, check in about assignments, but also say, I'm trying to work on this. Is anyone interested? Do you want to work with me on solving this problem? Do you want to work on this driverless car application, see if we can do better than Google? Great. Okay. So thanks everyone for that. I'll turn off Together Mode. We'll go off Together Mode and just onto the standard gallery. If you want to turn your videos off, feel free to, just so that it reduces the bandwidth on here, and then it's better for everyone so that we can all see the slides. Okay. So it's worth mentioning about the question. So I said early on in the presentation before, I'm happy to answer any questions you've got about the course, about BCU, about AI in general as well. If you've got any burning questions, especially after this presentation, feel free to throw them out, either in the chat, or if you want to do it, if you think later on, oh, I should have asked this, or I need to know about that, or I'm curious about that, I'm more than happy to answer those questions. Best way to do it is to email me at ian.rice@bcu.ac.uk and to start with the subject question, and then either the question in the subject or in the body of the email. But if you do that, it'll hit the top of my inbox and I'll look out for ones that have question. So great question, Mohammed. It probably won't surprise you, I don't have the number to the top of my head. Now, it depends what ranking you're looking at. In terms of BCU for computing overall, we are ranked in the top, I think we're 49th from an assessment, an exercise I did with my computing students last year. So 49th for computer science and computing overall as a field. That's ranked up against all UK institutions, including Oxford, Cambridge, Imperial, the internationally renowned ones. And we favour very well for employability, student experience, upskilling, all sorts of things, satisfaction. So we do very well. Internationally, I believe we're in the top 1,000 out of the top the 30,000 universities that compare with amongst each other. Yeah, we are top quarter, and I think that probably hopefully conveys a bit of, maybe you think it's cockiness, but my confidence in this course when I say I think that this is the best way to study AI as a conversion in the UK. Given if there's 190 UK universities, how many of those are doing conversions in data science, AI, computer science, whatever? This is the best way, and I guarantee you that if you stick with us and stick with the way that we teach, the things that we ask you to do, you will maximise your chance of employability and of a great long career using AI afterwards. So there is a distinction between data science and AI, and it's really subtle for people outside, and for people inside, we can argue about it all day long. Now, ours is an AI course because we do AI pipelines and workflows and ethics. And then that's not normally a data science aspect, although data scientists should know a bit about ethics, but AI is more ethics. Now, we don't do any robotics though, because including that amongst everything else, when most people who are AI specialists or experts are just using AI machine learning models and deep learning on data. So they're more at the data science aspect. So that's the market that we're hitting. We don't do robotics, so we're not a full hardcore AI course like that, but lots and lots of unis don't do robotics on their AI courses anyway. Why it's not a data science course is because data science in and of itself has some aspects and things that we don't teach. So we don't go too in depth into databases, into cloud management, and into some of those technical background computer architecture stuff that a data science course might expect. Plus, if the two courses are so similar, you could call our AI course a data science course, conversion course, but AI is better. It sounds better, not just for us, but for you when you graduate as well. When you're going for a job and you have an MSc in artificial intelligence, or you tell people I'm doing an MSc in AI, they've heard of that, they understand that. You tell them you do an MSc in data science, they know what data is, but do they know what data science is? So it's also a personal thing for you. In terms of accreditation, no, it's not accredited. We looked at it. We'd have to modify what we think is the best way to teach the course to get it accredited for, say, the British Computer Science Society or someone who isn't an AI-specific accreditation body. So it didn't seem worth getting it accredited. What we do is align our modules, our activities and things with some of the popular AI big using companies and vendors. So Amazon, Microsoft, IBM, like this IBM course we're doing today, you know, this is an IBM accredited course. We try and use some of their stuff. And like I said about the data visualization, we're going to teach Click, and we're going to use Click, go through the stuff for it, and then you can do the digital badge assessment for Click and go away and get that on your CV, on your LinkedIn profile. So we align with those because that stuff sits on your CV or on your LinkedIn profile and looks good that way, rather than an AI course that's accredited with X, Y, and Z, which just means that we've had to tailor the way that we teach it. How much maths is required for the MSc AI course? Not much at all. You need to be comfortable working with numbers, right? But not like, oh, I can multiply 3 numbers in my head together. But like, not be intimidated when you're looking at a page of numbers and I'm saying, all right, let's look for some patterns here, and you'll see, well, what's the scale of the numbers? What's the scope of them? Are they changing quickly or up and down? But to be honest, more often than not, with those numbers, you just want to plot them and then understand them. And we'll come to that in a minute. Okay, when we were designing the course, we had a real argument about this, and we ended up limiting the maths aspects. You can do lots of maths for AI, and if you want to understand exactly what AI is doing, then you need a really good maths knowledge. There are literally a handful of people, I believe, that actually understand from a mathematical point of view what cutting-edge deep learning models and techniques actually do. And they are not working at Google or Amazon or Microsoft or the places, or Facebook, or the places that are implementing them, which is a bit scary if you do understand it. So, but the thing is, you need to do maths at the PhD level really to be able to understand and to do that. So it's sort of, for you guys, the quickest and the best thing to do in a year was to upskill and give you the tools, techniques, and say, here's how you do X, Y, and Z and solve these problems, because that's what you're going to come across in industry. Not, can you design this new model, solve the equations to make sure that it's working completely right, and look for the maximum or the minimum value that you can just do numerically or in code. So shall I? To snobby people, it might do, in brutally honest. But this is the thing, in computing, people are very insecure, generally, and try and get round that insecurity by an overconfidence or an exclusivity that's often given. So they might try and look down on it, but they won't know it's a conversion course from your CV. It will just say MSc Artificial Intelligence. So it's up to you if you tell them. They might assume it's a conversion course based on your undergraduate degree, but it's up to you how you tell that story. But are you going to know as much about AI as if you've done a computer science undergraduate degree? 100%. Okay. Are you going to know how to create a website? No, I'm not going to teach you that. They might have done that on an undergraduate degree. Is that important for AI? No. So it's sort of, we're really streamlining those bits. But that's why what we teach is about the thinking about what AI is doing, the pipelines, the ethics and stuff that people without a computing background tend to be better at. And we did a lot of research when we set up this course, which is why we know we're a strong course compared to other universities that didn't do the research. We found out what people needed from a conversion point of view and what skills could be taught easily and what was more challenging. Mohammed, you've asked about coding. We're going to use Python only because 90% of the best AI and cutting-edge AI models come out in Python. Once you've built up a proficiency in Python, you can learn Java quite easily. But to be honest with Java, data scientists and AI experts don't use Java too much hands-on. They use Waker, if you're familiar with that. And so they just import the data into that and use those tools. So it's even less at the cutting edge, and the hard coding edge than Python. Great point, Alice. Thanks. Yeah, so conversion graduates are often more employable because they have industry knowledge, and this MSc gives you the skills to apply that knowledge. 100%. Olasola, you've asked what kind of companies can I work with if I venture graduate from MSc AI? That'll depend entirely on what companies are recruiting, but anyone who wants a data scientist or has a data problem, you can go and work with. So what are some of the PhD work areas being done at BCU in there? So it's quite broad, and our AI and data science experts and computing experts at BCU have a lot of different interests. We're very fortunate that our head of department in AI and computing and data science is Professor Mohammed Gaba, who is ranked amongst the top 1,000 scientists in the world in AI and computing. So he is a very big shot internationally. We're very fortunate to have him in the department, and he shapes some of the research directions. So there are people working on image recognition, on streaming data, on anomaly detection with images. I have a student who's working on automatic question classification, so using natural language processing to look at questions and then automatically classify them to then decide what kind of responses and support should be given from an education point of view. I've got another student who's looking at mobile phone data, who's just about to start with me, and trying to identify themes and structures in large mobile phone harness data. So based on the apps that you're looking at and the websites you go to, the streaming services you use, which other million people are you like? And then what inference can we do about you, whether you want to target marketing or your analysis thereof, etc. So there's a new student that I've got doing that. We've got ones who are doing evolutionary algorithms, so computing that can learn and teach itself. It's just such a range. I'll talk about a healthcare one actually shortly. How useful is AI in cybersecurity? Well, we have a PhD student that I recently did their first year annual review of, who's using AI in cybersecurity. And that ends up being an anomaly detection task more than anything else, but it is a cutting edge AI application. So looking at router data, at network data, communications across large distributed networks and saying, is this behavior normal or not normal? Why is it not normal? Is it not normal because it's a weekend, or because people are remote working at the minute, or is person X accessing stuff that they just shouldn't be accessing? So it can be really useful there. Okay, we have an MSc in cybersecurity as well, but what I'm meaning by that is you can do the AI course and say to me, I'm really interested in cyber. Can you put me in touch with the team there and see if I can set up for my dissertation project an AI cybersecurity project? 100% we can. So I think I've worked through your questions. Any more, please keep them coming. Otherwise, we're going to look at our little intro to artificial intelligence. So I just want to frame this, and this is a personal view as a senior lecturer of AI at BCU, but everyone's going to have a different view on this. Okay, so it's worth framing it first. Before we specify the three main types of AI and go any further, we have to actually define artificial intelligence. The scope of this definition leaves room for an almost infinite variety of different levels of AI, so the field is segmented into three different areas. Okay, but if we start with AI as a branch of computer science concerned with replicating human intelligence in machines so that those machines can perform tasks that typically require a human intelligence, for instance, planning, learning, reasoning, problem solving, and decision making. Artificial narrow intelligence is goal-oriented and is designed to solve specific singular tasks like facial recognition, speech recognition, driving a car, and searching the internet. Then we've got artificial general intelligence. Okay. Artificial general intelligence is the concept of a machine that mimics human intelligence and behavior with the ability to learn and apply its intelligence to solve any problem. The human brain is the blueprint for this level of intelligence, so naturally its creation is an unsolved challenge. so an AI like a human brain. Achieving general intelligence in the machine will allow for potentially infinite parallelization, allowing for unified problem solving. So once we've solved that with one AI model that sits on, a million different server machines and is scaled massively like that, we can go, okay, well, it's on a million server machines. We're going to just install another million or another million like that and scale up and have multiple different of these AI general intelligence bots. Achieving general intelligence in a machine will allow for a potentially infinite parallelization. So think about a football game with messy standard players who can all read each other's minds. That would be an set of AI general intelligence bots solving a problem. Or an online game where an entire team or guild play the same strategy in perfect unison. This level of AI in and of itself will allow for rapid technological growth and development. So if you're familiar with the Avengers films or Marvel films, Jarvis in Iron Man was touching parts of general intelligence. Okay? So he's beyond what we're currently capable of. But he had clear deficiencies compared to this definition. He was mostly a computer system connected to the whole Stark network with a voice interface, so speech recognition and natural language understanding. Then our third type of AI is artificial superintelligence. It's the point at which AI becomes self-aware. That's very difficult to imagine in reality and is expected to achieve exponential growth in an independent way. Okay. So let's think of narrow AI, because we're not at general intelligence or superintelligence. Okay. So we're going to focus in on narrow AI because that's where our course will focus. So since we haven't made significant progress towards those, this is where data scientists and research groups are investing trillions in right now. Let's delve deeper into what's meant by intelligence in specific tasks. So from a computational point of view, when anyone says they're using AI, what they actually mean generally is that they're using machine learning or ML. There are some tangible bits at the side of this that's outside machine learning, but that's generally touching robotics aspects. Okay, but machine learning is such a significant proportion of AI that generally when anyone says they're doing AI, they're doing machine learning. Okay. Now we'll look into specific tools and techniques of machine learning shortly, but I just want to discuss a specific area you've heard of hopefully recently, and that would be deep learning, or DL. Deep learning is a type of machine learning where instead of having a single mathematical function designed to solve a problem well, which is what machine learning is, so a mathematical function that you then embody in code to solve a problem, deep learning, the functions are implemented in a hierarchy to learn from one another. So it's multiple different functions, hence deep, function after function after function. So we'll look at an example of this after some background on machine learning. Okay. So machine learning can be unsupervised or supervised. Okay. Two different things that require different ways of thinking about it. So if I give you some data and say, what are we looking at here? I don't have any labels or any outcomes for that. I've just got some data, say all of our customers for a shop, and I've got their age and how far away from the shop they live, how much they normally spend on their shopping. And you say, well, what are we looking at here? What types of customers do we have? You can use something called clustering. So each of these points represents a person, and maybe it's what they spend on the shop versus how far away they live. So if they live really far away and are spending lots, but some of them spend hardly anything but live a middle way away, okay? And some of them that don't live very far away So on this axis, don't live very far away, but spend a medium amount. So they're regularly walking past the shop and spending a bit of money. Clustering is about taking that data, where it will be not coloured at all, and then saying, how many clusters or different types of groups of customer do we have? So we form clusters. Here we've got 5 different clusters. That's 5 different types of shopper. And maybe we want to deal with each of those differently. Maybe you want to give vouchers to these ones because you want them to keep coming a far distance and spending lots of money. And you want to give some different type of reward system to these ones to get them to spend more. Okay. Or maybe you want to make sure you're there at the door to meet these ones, to make sure they feel more comfortable, to make sure they feel like they want to be in your shop. So clustering is about segmenting your data into different groups or distinct clusters to then see what's going on in there. Okay. Machine learning is also great if we want to know what the chances of something are. So what's the probability of something happening? The chance of having a short delay on your flight versus a long delay on your flight. Okay. Lots of machine learning problems, in fact nearly all, can be posed as a question of what are the chances of that happening. Okay. That's a bit more complex if you're not familiar with a statistics background. Maybe it's supervised. Maybe you're giving it an image, like a driverless car scenario, and a group of people, and there's some absolutely giant data analysis and data labeling houses, particularly in India at the moment, where thousands of people are sat looking at images and clicking on people to say that's a person, that's a person, that's a person, that's a person, that's a lamppost, that's a road, and this is the area of the road, that's a car. And then you feed that data of all those labels of what's happening, so person, car, road, path, sign, to an AI algorithm along with the picture of it unlabeled, and then it tries to look at the picture and automatically understand where people are, where the road is, so that it can drive along it. So the fact that we've got these different colors for people, for the road, for the path, for the lampposts and the signs and things, that is the labels, and the labels make it supervised. Okay. Or maybe it's supervised because we want to predict the future. So we've trained a model on this part of the data up until today, if today was 1955. And so we've got data that looks like this. What's going to happen next when we've run out of data, but I need to know what the number of air passengers is going to be next year, the year after, the year after. Do I need, if I'm British Airways, do I need to invest in a new aeroplane or a new fleet of aeroplanes? Or can we cope for the expected demand in the summer months with our current fleet? Okay. So that would be a supervised, because you're seeing some data and then predicting the future. And then you can test how well your prediction performed. So those are some machine learning aspects, and where you split it into unsupervised and supervised. Then if we look at a deep learning application. Okay. So deep learning, rather than just being a simple, like I say, clustering, going, here's the data, put it into clusters, job done. Deep learning is mathematical function after function after function after function in a deep hierarchical way to get some understanding from it. Okay. And it learns really abstract features normally. So the top end images look at faces. So these are black and white images of faces or of cars. And then the deep learning algorithm will look at different things. So each of those different mathematical functions will say, look at eyes, one will look at eyebrows, one will look at foreheads, noses. If it's trying to do facial recognition, look at people's jaws. Actually get the most accurate facial recognition if you can get a good picture of someone's ear, because those don't change over time, apart from piercings. And then you get really abstract as you go really deep in the deep learning models. But then you get brilliant classification or facial recognition. So they're generalizing there. And the same way that they're generalizers down here. Okay, but in the middle layers, it's found the different features like wheels, bonnet, roof, boot, for instance. So it's found all of those things. So I think the question is generally, what can AI do? That's what businesses want to know. What can it do for me? I think the real question, though, is what can AI do well? And that is why we have a whole year-long course for you to get to grips with what it can do well. AI is very good at subjective discrimination. And that's what people, it tries to mimic a human way of looking. So we give it some data that's been cleaned and prepared by a human from a decision-making process, for instance, and it tries to understand what subjective things led that human to make that decision. So whether you've got self-driving cars, for instance, where you've got these people that are labeled roads and things, and the car is making a subjective decision that when it's looking at this picture, person, road, other car, drive down road, don't hit person, don't go on path, don't hit other car. Subjective discrimination based on the image. That's typically supplemented with things like LiDAR or other radar-based systems, so that it gets data in more and more robust ways, rather than just looking at pictures, which originally Tesla was one of the only ones that tried to do it with just image recognition, but actually LiDAR makes it much more suitable and safe. So being able to process images and laser return feedback from where the position of other cars relative to the car that's being driven. So AI can do quite a good job of driverless cars, we're seeing. Okay. Tesla often say that when they've got full self-drive actually working, that their cars will skyrocket in price, because once it gets licensed, that car will then be a taxi that can go and earn you money whilst you're working. So it could drop you off at the office, then go and do a whole day of taxi runs, and then come back and pick you up. Okay. Driverless cars are the common thing in AI, and especially AI ethics. So it's kind of, I tend to move on from those because it's been talked about a lot and a bit boring. What about predictive healthcare? So as mentioned, during my postdoc year, so after my PhD, I worked with Birmingham Children's Hospital. I actually worked with children, babies like this, where a company that I worked with created these sensors, and they're fantastic heart rate sensors that just go on like a plaster, stick on the baby, and then work out what the baby's heart is doing, but also how much they're breathing. And we take other data like their oxygen saturation, or the percentage of oxygen going through their blood. Okay, and it should be quite high normally. That's what's taped onto their foot there, an extra sensor. It has to be taped on because otherwise they kick it off, or they pull it off, or mess with it, and that really does mess with the sensor readings. What we'll do here, actually, I was gonna, we'll take a break from the slides. I'm going to show you an example. So if you can just, I'll have to cancel my presentation just to make this work. So if you can let me know if you can see this dashboard there, the dark blue background one. I'll zoom right in. Okay, so I'm not expecting you to know what you're looking at here because I haven't explained it at all. But by the end of the course, you'd be comfortable by looking at this, understanding what's going on, probably, if you understood a bit about healthcare, but also how to create some of this stuff. So we've got an interactive dashboard here with some data from a hospitalized patient at Birmingham Children's Hospital. So this was a baby, and the doctors were previously looking at this data. Okay, so they were looking at pulse rate and oxygen saturation, or percentage of oxygen in the blood, and that would be you'd want that to be in the low 90s of a percentage. This baby has a bit lower, so is receiving oxygen therapy to try and raise that. We've got a measurement from that plaster sensor that I told you about across the baby's chest that tells you what their heart is doing, to how many times their heart's beating in a minute, or HR, and how many times they're breathing in a minute. So that's their RR, respiratory rate. So this is their data, and this is what doctors were looking at. Okay, so I was brought onto the project to see what we could do with AI to try and help them now. Okay, so this is data from a patient from 2016. And you'll notice just by looking at it, the best thing always to do with first of all data is plot it and once you've cleaned it and have a look at it. Okay, and you'll notice that there's periods where it's like plummeting stuff. Okay, why is it plummeting? Well, it's all dropping to 0. Well, that means that we've got bad data there. That data wasn't cleaned out. But I'm against cleaning out and removing data if it's important for people to know what's going on in those gaps. So this is a patient, right? Sometimes there's big periods of the data dropping. So the doctors, they told us that that's a big problem for them, that they need to try and deal with quite regularly. So the first thing that we did was used AI and said, okay, we'll give you back your oxygen saturation as a percentage in the gaps in your data. So if I just get the oxygen saturation, and here's our black line is what our AI algorithm said the percentage was, even when the data had dropped, the sensor had dropped off and wasn't working. Okay, and the doctors have this tool so that they can go back in time and look and fill in the missing data there. So, oh, that's really useful. But we've also got the same problem with heart rate and breathing rate. Can you do that? Those are more complicated signals. Yeah, you can, 100%. So even when the heart rate drops a bit first of all and then disappears completely, we can fill in the gaps and say, no, yeah, it looked like it was dropping, but actually it was going to climb back up again, and it did. So that was the first bit we did. Then they said, right, we need a smart alarm. I reckon there's stuff in that data when when a child has a heart attack or a cardiac arrest, their heart stops. What can you do in terms of predicting in advance when that's going to happen? Well, it turns out we can do quite a lot actually. So we created a measure, this blue one called the RI, or the Rapid Intervention Index. That is a measure of uncertainty about a child's future state. So if the child's getting worse in terms of their health, then that number is going to be higher. And that was essentially their smart alarm. Okay. And we created this alarm system, which I've got it just in the smart alarm in and of itself here. Okay. If it exceeded this black line, then it was indicating that that child was seriously at risk and that they needed to go and make sure, go and do something from the doctor's point of view. And it could happen very quickly, but often there were signs multiple hours in advance. Okay, for cardiac arrest or heart stopping, we managed to give over 12 hours and sometimes even 48 hours advance notice that the patient was getting more sick. Right? So it looks like the patient's gotten sick here, but actually that's a bit of a jump just because the heart rate dropped really low once. So the heart's beating hardly any times, 34 times instead of 110 that we'd be expecting it to. So there's something weird going on there, but it only went once, and actually they recovered. So if they recovered after that point, then chances are that they were okay, and it was either a bad measurement or they were sick suddenly, but they got better. So we, instead of just showing the blue curve that was the instant value of the alarm, we said, no, we need to smooth that out slightly. So instead of so many peaks and troughs, we smooth it out using another AI algorithm to make a nice smooth curve, and that's what the alarm is telling you. And that didn't exceed this threshold for an alarm. Because if you have an alarm going off too often, the patients switch it off, or it keeps them awake at night, and the nurses switch off. So by the end of the course, I've got people who are doing a project on this right now, a master's dissertation project on this data, but you would be able to understand what I've done to this data to fill in the missing values, also to come up with what that smart alarm is and how that works. Okay, and we said there were lots and lots of patients on the trial with that hospital data, so I had a lot of work to do. Some of them didn't have any oxygen saturation or pulse data at all, so we need to fill in an awful lot. Okay. So that's in essence what I mean by predictive healthcare, being able to predict in advance what's going on with patients, and what we can do about that. There are all sorts of ethical conundrums with that too, and second stage of that project is just about to get funded. So I'll potentially have some more of that data to bring to you all as examples of AI in healthcare going forwards. AI and cyber. I talked already about this, so I think I'll just move on from that point. But AI is quite regularly used in cyber, both for attacking and defending against attacks. Personalized insurance. So based on all sorts of data from insurance companies, seeing what people are doing. Are they having accidents? Are they not? Are they a risk or not? Are men more likely to have an accident than women when you're doing car insurance, for instance? And what can be done about that? So actuaries, the particular industry, are using AI and big data and analysis to try and do personalized insurance, because they want the most robust measure of the cost to insure you personally, so that it's cheaper for everyone who's not as much a risk, but that you're going to pay your fair share, or what they think is your fair share. Problem is, this ends up going into personalized healthcare, for instance, and it changes the outcomes, and that's what's seen a lot in America. And there's a very big ethical conundrums and questions about whether or not that's the right set of steps to do. What about an election? Can AI change the outcome of an election? What do people think? Well, that's a resounding agreement there, yes. Yeah, so there's some great documentaries and things that have been done recently on the power of AI and data analysis in areas like electioneering, but also things just as simple as changing the boundaries so that when you're voting in a specific region, what that region entails, to make sure that they have as many, in America, for instance, as many red states or blue states as possible. So they change the regions of these. Yeah, so as one of the guest lectures, you'll get talked to about graph theory on the course, and we'll be talking about what are called gerrymandering. So how to use graph theory and AI to try and identify ways of electioneering that way, but also things from like target marketing and understand the demographics to try and make sure that you're encouraging people in the right way, depending on what you think the right way is. The Vote Leave campaign in Brexit was accused and found to be using big data analytics and AI through Cambridge Analytica to change the direction of the Leave campaign. So I think the real question is, what are you going to do with AI? I think that's really important for you to try and get an understanding on to think about where you want to go. And that can change 4 or 5, 10 times even on the course. And you'll learn about stuff or find out about people's research or projects or stuff that's going on and think, you know, I want a piece of that. I want to go and work in that area. I want to do a PhD. Oh, I don't want to do a PhD. I want to get hands-on and do this, or I want to teach AI to kids. Great. So that's the real question. What are you going to do with AI? How are you going to do it? And are you going to do it ethically and robustly? Okay. So, does anyone have any questions so far on AI as the whole, AI for good, or about the course or anything so far that you want to jump in with now? So I can see I've got a question there from Mohammed earlier. To not register with UK computing departments create any problem for us. So I'm not really sure, Mohammed, I understand the question, but the MSc AI is taught within the computing department at BCU. So if you're meaning about accreditation, no, that doesn't matter so much, or not from any of the studies of the impacts that we found for graduate jobs, recruitment, or anything. Okay. The biggest thing, like I say, is one, having an MSc and the experience and a portfolio that you can point to. And then some employers like you to have a couple of digital badges, either be familiar with Microsoft systems or Amazon systems or IBM systems. And they're generally one of those three for cloud-based online systems. You never know which one they're going to be. I have my own opinions about which ones are best. And IBM are natural partners for this course, so we tend to align more with their stuff. But you absolutely can go away and do digital badging and then the qualifications for Microsoft or for Amazon Web Server and the AI stuff there. So that's a point that to think about, looking into, seeing about that. Great. Perfect. So the next thing that we have to cover is our first open data science for all course. I've got a couple more questions actually, we'll jump to those. Can you advise on the appropriate laptop specifications that will enable a smooth usage of the required softwares and coursework? You're on the ball, Henry. Okay, so no, in all honesty, and because it depends very much on your disposable income and how you work best. Okay, lots of people in computing like to use Macs. I'm currently using one as well. I'm not the biggest Apple fan, in all honesty, for lots of reasons, but they are quite good for programming because they're a good bridge between Windows and Linux. And Linux is really good for programming, and Windows is really good for Microsoft Office and for documents and professional stuff. So Macs give you that good middle ground, but they're very expensive, right? I'm not turning in any way saying everyone go out and buy a Mac. That's just not appropriate. But that's just a general feeling. What you want is to try and find, I would recommend a good household brand. So stick to, Sony, Toshiba, Lenovo, IBM stuff. One of those main computing brands that you've heard about rather than one that you haven't, because they're more reliable. Get it from a reputable seller as well to make sure that you've got some comeback and you can take the actual physical laptop back to them and say, this ain't working. You've sold me a duff one if it doesn't work for whatever reason, because I'd hate for you to order it online and then not have any recourse if it's not working. So those are the first thing, and then you want to try and work out the best spec that you can. Now, where possible, we're going to be using Colab and online resources. So that's not going to place any resource requirements on the laptop, but there will be a couple of things where we have to use the laptop. Okay, and you'll have to install something called Spider, which you can write Python code in. Similar, exactly the same as writing it online, but you just do it on your own computer. That's when we've got really big data sets that just take too long on the cloud. So something that would take 8 hours in the cloud to run, we're going to just run it on your computers and get you to do it, and that'll take a couple of hours then maximum. But you want something that's quick enough to do that. Okay, so find the best reasonable spec that you can afford from a household brand, and it's worth paying slightly more to get a better brand of computer at a lower spec than a worse brand but a better spec generally. How would you ask that? Will the project be group or individual? It will be individual. Okay, although there are some instances where people are working on projects with, like, the same project with other people. Okay. So I'd had a question. In order to work on a project during the course, how do we get the data to be worked on? So this is a really interesting point, Olga, and it depends on what the project is. So there is a lot of data freely open and available online, a surprising amount, or you can create your own, depending on what the problem is. But if you've got a specific area that you want to work on, and like, so I've got a company that we worked with this last year, who are doing change management, right? So they do interviews and they do surveys and structured data assessments and things. So if you wanted to work on survey data, for instance, and understand that more, I could just put you in touch with that company and say, can we work, to the company MA Associate, can we get some of your data so that this person can work on it? They'd be more than happy for you to work on it and see if you can find out something that they don't know about it, or that would be useful to them. So, or that may be critical or confidential, given that you're going to work probably for free for them, or potentially benefit them, or be no cost to them, they'd be quite happy to hand it over a bit of data. Some of it will be confidential and they won't want to. Okay? But it just depends what the application is. So Edna, I wouldn't necessarily know what brands of computers to recommend. That sort of reaches into the territory of me endorsing a particular company. But just review online, what general like computing review sites, technology sites and things, and reviewing and recommending things. So Augustine, the course does not have a robotics element. So we denied about it, and actually nearly everyone who's doing AI is doing it from a computational and software point of view rather than a robotics point of view. And the people who are doing robotics in AI tend to have PhDs, or they're doing simple robotics that you don't need an advanced qualification for. So that was the argument that we got back from industry. They didn't want robotics on the course, really. So we don't do that. As far as multi-agent systems goes, you're pushing individual dissertation project levels there. You absolutely could do a multi-agent system, and we can supervise that project 100%. Or you could do a little, side project during the first semester if you wanted to, and we could help you with that. But we wouldn't be teaching a multi-agent system in and of itself. Okay, but don't worry about asking questions late. I'm more than happy to answer those. Okay, so I'll just give it one more minute. Now I'm just looking at the time. We're on 12:30. So I'm going to suggest that we take a half hour for lunch. And we'll start back just after 1 o'clock. Okay. Mohammed, you asked, is there a requirement for the thesis at the end? Yes, there is requirements and specifications and all that stuff. It's best if we just deal with that at the point of the project, because if you think about it too much too early, you stress about that and not about the modules that we want you to at the time we want you to. Okay. So we're going to take a lunch break. Everyone will get back at 1 p.m. where I'll introduce the Open Data Science for All course, and we'll do our first bit of thinking about computing there, and then jump into our first bit of programming. Okay. As ever, my emails are open, so remember, if you've got a particular question that you want me to answer in the Ask Me Anything that you don't want me to do, or don't feel comfortable doing in the chat, and want me to do anonymously, that's fine too. So just email me at ian.rice@bcu.ac.uk and email with the subject line question. Okay. I'll just also paste back in. There are 3 links. So one to get open, that's the Colab notebook we're going to be working with later that I'll introduce. One for most of the files for today that has all the presentations and a tiny little data set in that we're going to work with. And then this one that's a bigger file. that I'm going to be talking about later. Okay, you can download if you want to. It takes a little while to download because it's 130 meg. Okay, don't try and open that one. If you do, it will try and open it in Microsoft Excel of all applications, and then it will turn around and say this file's too big for Microsoft Excel. Okay, so sort of frames where we're going with AI and data. Okay, so thanks everyone for coming along so far. We're going to take a half-hour break and we're back just after 1 o'clock. Okay, so I'll leave the chat going, but I'm going to turn off the video and the microphone, and I'll put a notification up.